Well, you're not seeing things. The camera's not flipped. I'm playing left-handed. And that's what the discussion's going to be today. I hope you stick with me because I've got two interesting topics that I think you'll enjoy. The first one is the upside down Stratocaster, its features, its drawbacks. And the second one is Jimi's mission from God and how he accomplished that in basically 4 short years. But just hang in there and we'll have a good time today. Um, I get a lot of interest on this left-handed guitar. I mean, this is a Nash. I bought it, I think 2015, 16, something like that. And I've played it for a long time, so now I know the difference between, a standard Strat and an upside down Strat. And I wanted to help you if you ever thought about buying one to decide. I know this topic's been beat to death. I found even Popular Mechanics did an article on it, I think in 2015. And I'm going to put all the links to everything I reference, some video clips, some violin sonatas, and all kinds of crazy stuff in the description. So if the copyright police get me and I have to remove them from the video, all the links will still be in the description. So explore those because there's going to be quite a few and they're pretty interesting. I think you'll enjoy them. But got one of my other Hendrix shirts on. Thank you, Kurt. Another friend that's from the Bosnia, Croatia area contacted me, and he's a lefty. And he wanted me to help him figure out what kind of guitar to buy. And he's in the same situation Jimi was, except it was worse back in the 60s because they just didn't make left-handed guitars. And if they did, they were special order and they were expensive. So Jimi was forced, and that's the divine intervention, forced into playing right-handed Strats. But we'll get into that a little later. First, we're going to go into the features of a upside down Strat, why you might want one and why you might not want one. And I'll show you a little clip on how Jimi played in certain areas that were very difficult for a normal person, but you can see how long his fingers are. And he played with ease up here, which it'd be like this. This is one of the drawbacks for me, is getting up here, but you'll notice he plays like this and his little finger is out there. But all of the stuff that I've been preaching or touting about Stratocasters and what makes them sound right, like the springs and the block and the tremolo and floating versus decked and reverse headstock and all that, have been reaffirmed recently in a Guitar Village interview of Roger Mayer. That link is also in the description, where Roger talks about Jimi's Strats for about 18 minutes, and it's very interesting, and you'll learn something if you watch it about Strats, the way they're built, what he did to make them sound better. And so I think you're going to enjoy this. Let's start looking at the technical part of the upside down Stratocaster. Okay, let's start first with one of my favorite features of the left-handed Strat, or upside down Strat, depending on which handed you are, is this reverse headstock. And here's a photo, God rest his soul, Jeff Beck, with his reverse headstock. We're going to miss you, Jeff. This is the reason I bought this left-handed Strat, was to see what difference there was between the two guitar sounds. And this, to me, makes one of the biggest differences, and Roger goes over this too, which I was real happy to see that he reiterated everything I've been saying. But it's more like a piano. It's strung more like a piano with the long bass strings. Get these long bass strings, and it makes them sound different. I don't want to get into all the description of the way they sound, but just trust me, they have this big full sound to them. And then the shorter plain strings are quick to bend, especially when you get up here. And you'll notice that if you want to emulate Jimi, you basically have to have an upside down Strat. That's all there is to it. And I honestly think that Leo Fender would have designed his Strat just like this if it weren't for having the tuners on the bottom, because it's awkward to tune down there. And because I think he probably saw that there was an advantage to having these strings longer on the top and shorter on the treble. But he didn't do it. But Gibson did do it. And here's some photos of Gibson's Firebird. And what they did to kind of compensate for that, they had actually a reverse and a standard headstock. And I'm not sure if the one like this was called a reverse or the standard. Either way, when it was strung up like this with the bass strings longer, they had those banjo tuners on the back. And here's some photos of the banjo tuners. And that made it a little easier to tune, but I've heard those banjo tuners are just a total pain in the rear. I guess they don't work that good, but they're still selling them. Brand new replicas. So when Jimi's up here, you'll notice that the notes bend really quickly. There's less string to bend, so it makes them bend a little quicker to the pitch that you're trying to get to. And I just had a thought the other day, and I'm not so sure it's accurate, but you know, a lot of people say, well, when I bend this string, these other strings go flat. And they do. Let's see. But I'm thinking that with a reverse headstock, it might not be as prominent. Because I tell everybody, I said, I don't have that problem. I do it all the time, and I never notice it. So, and a lot of it has to do with having 5 springs, too. You got to have the 5 springs. And Roger goes into that, too. But that's my favorite feature. And I've bought 2 reverse headstock Music Craft necks just recently and love them. This is one of them. And I'd have them on all my Strats if I could afford it. But that's my favorite feature right there. Of course, you have to change the nut to string it normally. Yeah, that's not a big deal. When you order them, they'll make it for a right-hander or a left-hander, whichever one. And my buddy in Denver I'm working with, it's from Bosnia, he's going to buy a right-handed guitar, and he's a lefty, and he's just going to, fight the drawbacks, which I'll show you here in a second. One of the other things I've always said about the pocket, and Roger goes into this quite a bit, he would, I don't know exactly how he did it, but he said he would shave those or he would make that pocket and the neck fit perfectly. And he didn't say that he didn't have a shim in there, but I'm sure there were no shims in there. And because those will just create a little air gap. See, and I've had a lot of questions about shims. So no shims. None of my guitars have shims in them. I'm not exactly sure why Fender even did it. It became standard there for a while. I think everybody wanted this low action. If you put a shim in there, it tilts the neck back a little bit. It makes it feel like you can get this really low action. But I don't think they play right, and they don't sound as good either. We go from the neck to the body. Now, where Roger talks about you get a lot more beef here in the body on the treble strings. You see the cutaway is a lot smaller here. And so you've got all this extra meat over here that gives the treble strings, the plain strings, a little more punch, which Jimi had plenty of. That's another feature of the left-handed or the upside-down Strat. And another one of my favorites, and you'll see a lot of people, Stevie Ray, probably Doyle, maybe even Eric, is the whammy bar on top. That's my favorite thing. I I think that should be on all Strats. On the pickups, we'll get to the pickups here. Roger has always said that the pickups are the most overrated aspect of the guitar. He said they went through and experimented with the Strat pickups and did different winds and different numbers of winds. And he said it didn't make any difference, or it did, and I mean you lose some clarity when you put too much wire on there. So he said they just stuck with Leo's designs and never messed with it. He says it's way overrated. So for all you pickup makers out there, you know, it's probably not good news. But everybody, you know, loves their different pickups. I'm sure, and some of them do sound better than others. You get, you know, low output, high output. This one actually has a little bit higher output. These are Rumpelstiltskin Experiences. Nico's going to go with the Gypsies, which were 5.6K, 5.6K, and 6.1K in the bridge. These are a little hotter, but they're not really hot. They just have a lot of power. And but getting back to the whammy bar, my favorite thing is this whammy bar on top. And you see Jimi, it was perfect for Jimi, you know, when he's doing this stuff. And he's, whoops, it does hit the knob sometime or the switch, so you got to be careful. But see, he could sit there and do this. It's pretty hard to do it when it's down here, you know, holding your guitar like this and trying to hold that whammy bar. So it was perfect for him. You know, he's up here doing this, wow, wow, wow. And you can really get a full dive bomb up here. So that is one of my favorite features. And you have to have the reverse route in your Strat to even put one of these in your Strat. So don't think of just buying a left-handed tremolo system. It's not going to fit. But that's why if you're going to go this route, first thing you would do is change the neck and just live with a regular Strat with the reverse headstock. But if you want the full Monty, like they say, you're going to have to get a left-handed Strat or right-handed if you're lefty. And actually having the controls up here was one of the drawbacks. I'll get into the drawbacks now. Having the controls up here was a real pain because the knobs turn pretty easily. And you'll see pictures of Jimi's Strats with the knobs off. I think he did that sometimes because they were just turning too easily. When you're up here like this, you'll hit that volume knob all the time. And what I did was put a little rubber ring under there to give it a little resistance, and I don't have that trouble anymore. And I actually had to do it on the lower or the upper tone control because I would hit those two knobs and turn them, but I would not hit the middle knob. So the middle knob doesn't have a ring on it. So that was one of the bad features or drawbacks. So that's not a bad feature, but, and then the other one is having the jack up here. What's it gonna do? It's right in the way of your arm, right? So in Jimi's day, they had small kind of low profile jacks, probably a 90 degree angle plug that went in there. Nowadays, everything's heavy duty, beefed up, you know? So this was about the smallest one I could find. And it sticks in there. Jimi's probably didn't have this big piece right here sticking out, which kind of hits your arm. You get used to it after a while, but it's not so bad. And then you hook your, you know, your cable over here, and it doesn't really get in the way too much. Having the switch up here can have its advantages. That's not too bad. Now the pickups, the height of the pickups, it almost looks like they're even because I got reverse staggered vintage pickups so I could emulate a left-handed guitar. And when you do the 1/8 inch on the bass and a 6/64 on the treble, that's what I adjust all my pickups to, they come out pretty flat. Now in a standard Strat, you know, they're pretty much angled quite a bit. But some people say Jimi didn't adjust his pickups. and that's what made it sound different too. But I'd also read that Seymour Duncan asked him how he set them up, and that's where he got the 1/8 inch and the 664. So apparently Jimi did have a preference. But with an upside down Strat, they look like they're kind of flat. And if you look at Jimi's guitars, they do look, pretty straight across. The other thing about the pickups is this reverse tilt. And Roger goes into the reverse tilt that it cuts down on the ice pick sound of the playing strings because it moves it away from the bridge some and gives you a little more brightness on the bass strings. And so I don't know. It's really hard for me to notice that difference unless I've never really tried to sit there and play back and forth. But I mean, that's pretty hard for me to tell the difference. But if you want it, a Hendrix style guitar, you got to get that too. Also, Roger goes into the importance of setting these 6 screws up and having 6 screws. So that's why I'm thinking maybe the more modern 2-screw tremolo. The reason I don't like them is just they just don't sound the same. And he says these screws have to be set up perfectly to get that nice solid contact from the bridge to the strings to the body. The way I set mine up now is I take the springs off and everything, just let it sit flat, just screw the screw in till it just starts to raise the bridge plate, and then just barely back it off to where it goes back down flush with the body. And because sometimes they say give it a little extra slack. I don't go with that extra slack anymore because the tremolo can actually kind of jump up and down on the screws a little bit if you have too much slack there. So, and this tremolo stays in great tune. When I first got this guitar, it was a nightmare. I wanged it and it went so out of tune. I was going, oh no, because I was worried about that. And it's all about the saddles, but I don't want to get into that right now. I've got the Highwoods on here. I've got them on all my guitars now. They help with holding grease in that little groove and keeps them from going out of tune. But now let's get into one of my favorite things, and one of the things that I really just learned recently about Jimi is his spirituality. And we'll get into that now.
Oh, yeah? Well, me and the Lord, we got an understanding.
We're on a mission from God.
We're putting the band back together.
Again. Oh, wait. We're on a mission from God.
Matt, me and Elwood, putting the band back together.
Ma'am, you gotta understand that this is a lot bigger than any domestic problems you might be experiencing.
Would it make you feel any better if you knew that what we're asking Matt here to do is a holy thing?
You see, we're on a mission from God.
First you trade the Cadillac for a microphone. Then you lie to me about the band. Now you're gonna put me right back in the joint.
They're not gonna catch us. We're on a mission from God.
Lord works in mysterious ways.
Yep.
I hope you like that clip. That's a great movie. If you want to watch it, Blues Brothers. I haven't watched it in years, but I always, everybody, when they say I'm on a mission from God, it comes from that movie. But anyway, that's why Jimi did what he did. And to this day, he's still bringing the world together as far as musicians go. I mean, I'm talking to people all over the world that are huge Jimi fans, and it's just amazing. It's 55, almost 55 years later, and he did all that in a short 4-year term. And he got his first guitar, when he was 15. I'm sure he had been playing around with ukuleles and stuff probably since he was 12, but he didn't get his first electric guitar till he was 15. And he's 42, let's say that's 57, 58. '65, he was still playing with Isley Brothers and then Little Richard. And from 66 to 70, he basically changed the world as far as guitar goes. I mean, in 4 years, he changed the world, and he's still changing the world 50 something years later. But, you know, everybody says Jimi was left handed, and he was left handed, but he was more than left handed. He was ambidextrous. And that's another gift from God. I mean, you know, there's a lot of Kurt Cobain and Paul McCartney, a lot of famous left-handed guitarists, and it's the way your brain works. It was the reason why he could so easily play all those complicated passages and sing and everything. It was just like second nature to him because he was left-handed. But I don't know. I tried to find the clip and I couldn't find it, but I was hoping you guys have probably seen it, of one of the guys that was working in the studio, and Jimi was in there playing something left-handed, which I can't do, but he was playing some lick, pretty complicated as far as I can tell, and with the strings strung correctly, and Jimi flipped it over and played the exact same thing with the strings upside down and everything. And then after he did that, he looked at that guy in the studio and just grinned and kind of he gave him a little wink and said, "Yeah, you just saw that." So that is a super talent. And that is part of what gave Jimi the ability to do what he did, was being ambidextrous. So all you left-handers out there, count your blessings. But let's get into a little bit more of the spirituality of Jimi, which he kept a close secret.
The great pop festival. Such a large gathering of people with music, it shows that music must mean something.
I heard you use the expression an electric church.
We're playing for our sound to go inside the soul of the person.
All right, I also just got this book. That's the 80th birthday book, which a lot of you probably already have. But and today I saw is out for delivery is Janie's The Ultimate Lyric Book, and it's coming today. I'm the world's worst when it comes to lyrics. I think what happened was when we were young, a lot of times you couldn't hear the lyrics, so we just kind of gave up on them, and I never would read them. But Jimi's poetry is as good as his music and his playing, and I never realized that. Let me read this. So what I'm gonna do is focus on to show you Jimi's spirituality, which is 95% of why he was what he was. He believed in, science fiction. If you read these books, you'll find out he and his brother used to go down and watch those little science fiction ones. I forgot the name of it now, sorry, but where they would have little rocket ship models hanging by strings, and they would do videos like that, and they were just amazed with that. They would go down there and watch the whole series over a couple of month period. But here's where it started. This is in the Kramer book. Let me read this to you. With its signature riff completed, oh, I forgot. We're going to focus on Purple Haze, Jesus Saves. And I never knew that was the original title until I started researching this video, doing research for this video. I mean, I was shocked. I said, how come I never heard that before? And a lot of you guys probably already know it. It's pretty sad that I don't. But it says, with its signature riff completed, Hendrix began to edit down his Purple Haze lyrics in preparation for recording. Chandler had provided Hendrix with shelter, opportunity, and encouragement. In return, Hendrix loosened seemingly self-imposed restraints on his abilities. Not quite confident enough to address his spirituality, so prevalent in his later work, Hendrix pared down such phrases as Purple Haze, Jesus Saves, rejecting them as too personal. As Chandler has described, Hendrix's early efforts at songwriting were intensely, private. Songs were created from Hendrix poetry an interest he kept a virtual secret. Some years later, during the long construction of Electric Lady Studios, Hendrix spoke with studio president Jim Marin about his admiration for the poet E. E. Cummings. While Hendrix was never a voracious reader, Cummings' lyrical style, exotic imagery, and liberal use of colors struck a chord with Jimi. So it's all in these books. Now we're going to get to the. I'll show you. Here's a picture of. Well, there'll be a link to the picture of Jimi's handwritten lyrics, and it says, "Purple Haze, Jesus Saves." And yeah, I was kind of surprised, but now where it really gets interesting, if you listen to what Purple Haze really means, in my day, everybody thought it was drug related because they actually had an LSD tablet called Purple Haze. Now I'm from the 60s, so I know some of these things, but not that I ever did it, but either way, there was I got some Purple Haze or something, and I go, that we didn't even know. I don't even think I related it to Jimi's song. I don't know which one came first. I'm sure Purple Haze, because I think they probably named the acid after his song. But the song has nothing to do with drugs. Jimi explains it as he was in the bottom of the ocean and a purple haze surrounded him, and he was trapped in the bottom of the ocean. And then Jesus came down and grabbed him out of there and pulled him out. So he saved him from that purple haze. And I was just kind of shocked. And then after I did more research, I found out that it was very unique when we first heard it. I first heard it when it first came out in, 66? It was his second single, I think, that they call it the Devil's Interval or the Devil's Tritone. The Devil's Tritone. It's a diminished fifth, and it was actually semi-outlawed in the Renaissance. You weren't supposed to use it in religious music. That I never realized that was called the Devil's Tritone, and there's a link to the violin sonata that used that tritone, which is one of the hardest sonatas to play for a violinist. And I couldn't really hear this in there. But I'm just wondering, and I think that Jimi did that on purpose. He knew about that. He probably knew about the Devil's Tritone. And so he put it at the very beginning of the song. So believe me, there's more to Jimi's picture than meets the eye. And that is why you guys and the whole world's fascinated with him. Don't miss the whole story. It is him. Jimi was given a gift. He was sent by God. He had a mission. He accomplished it, and he went home. 4 years. He did all that in 4 years. And the crazy thing is, God said, okay, Jimi, I'm going to send you down there, and I'm going to seemingly put you at a disadvantage. I'm going to make you left-handed, and you're going to have to play an upside-down guitar. Believe me, it might seem like a disadvantage, but it's going to end up being an advantage because you're going to sound different than everybody else. And it's exactly what happened. Everybody says, Jimi, too bad he died young, and just think of everything he could have done. Just think of everything he did in 4 years. It's astonishing if you think about it. Hendrix went to the UK with Chas Chandler in 1966. Within a few months, he had 3 top 10 hits, Hey Joe, Purple Haze, and The Wind Cries Mary. by 1970, it changed the world. So you're talking almost maybe 3.5 full years. I mean, it's amazing. But you've heard the saying, only the good die young. Well, that's not a Billy Joel saying that. I mean, he wrote a song about it, but that comes from way back in somewhere between 430 and 580 BC with the Greeks. And it was a blessing to die young. And I'll put a link to that story. But so I'm not sure if this is a true story or a legend, but I know that Cleobus and Biton, the two sons of Cydippe, Cydippe, they did exist back in 445 BC. I think Wikipedia says 580 or something, like a long time ago. But death at one's moment of highest glory and adulation was the best reward that a god could bestow on a human. Seems ironic, doesn't it? But that's the way I look at Jimi's death. And the origin dates back like 445 BC. Cydippe, the priestess in the temple of goddess Hera, was to attend a festival in honor of the goddess Hera. However, the oxen that were to carry her to the festival were not to be found, and Cydippe sought the help of her young sons, Cleobus and Biton. Eager to help their mother, they yoked themselves to the cart and pulled it all the way to the festival, which was approximately 5 miles. Impressed with their strength and devotion to her, Cydippe prayed to Hera, the goddess, to reward her young sons with the greatest gift that a celestial might give to a mortal. Her prayer was answered. Cleobus and Biton fell asleep in the temple and never woke up. Hera bestowed on them the gift of death, and it is from here that comes the expression, roughly translated, call no man blessed until he is dead. But there you go. That is the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would have said way back in the 60s. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. I'm getting a new music craft neck in. Nico's neck is coming in Tuesday. I'll do another video on that. It's basically my neck in standard, regular maple, no roasting, but you'll get to see that. So I'll talk to you later.